Good evening and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Prashansa and I will be your host for this event. We are excited to have you all here today to learn about the English alphabetic code. So to prevent any disruptions, we'll be keeping everyone on mute. At the end, we'll have a 10-minute question answer session followed by a 2-minute quiz. Only those who registered, attended, and took part in the quiz will be awarded certificates. Without further ado, let me introduce our speaker, Sue Lloyd, to you. Sue Lloyd is a British educational author, teacher, co-author of the Jolly Phonics program, which is a popular method of teaching synthetic phonics. The Jolly Phonics program is now used in schools around the world and has been translated into many different languages. I will now turn the reins over to you, Sue.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody. This is still amazing technology. I'm sitting in my little room and speaking to you all. It still amazes me and frightens me a little bit because I press the wrong knobs and things, but hopefully we'll be well away. Let me share my screen. If you could share. Let me find. Okay, let me see if I can find my PowerPoint. There we go. There we are. Right. So basically, the English alphabetic code is really something that is quite simple and straightforward, but the straightforward thing is that it is linked to the sounds that we speak. Can you all see my screen?
Oh. No, we cannot. So would you mind if I share this screen?
Sorry, let's see if I can do better. So let me see. So you've shared your screen, so I should be able to go straight to my PowerPoint. Is that right?
Yeah. So I'll share, and you can just focus on speaking and explanation, and I would handle everything else. Okay.
Oh, okay. I hope I've. So let me see if I can make this large. Right. That's better. I think now everybody, can you hear me all right? I think we're straightforward now. Can you see? Can you hear me?
We can, ma'am, and we
can you see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering why it won't move on.
Yes, ma'am.
You're very kind. Why won't it move on? That's what I'm. I can't make my. There, that's moved on. Are you doing it? Anyhow, let's see if we can do a bit better. But basically, our alphabetic code is down to the phoneme level. That's the single sound. So you need to be able to hear every single sound in English to be able to work out the code. But I'm going to tell you how the code works. And words are basically made up of sounds, and there's a letter or letters that represents each sound. And this is our alphabetic code. Most European countries have this code, but there are a lot of languages that don't use a code like this, so that is different. So if you go to the next slide. This is important because I want you all to remember that it is a code. Unfortunately, it's not as lovely code as these ones. In maths, the code stays the same. It doesn't vary for certain sums, in different countries, but it does in our English code. Music notation, it's just the same, isn't it? It doesn't vary. If it's a dot on that line, you know exactly what the note is, whether it's a quaver or a crotchet. So, and the Morse code as well is very reliable, but you need to understand that the English alphabetic code, because it is based on the sounds we speak, is not so reliable, but still very essential. It's not reliable because our speech varies from place to place and country to country, and you know, it's not a precise thing. So the code is not always precise either, but ours is worse than most. So next slide. Now, English actually has the hardest and is most complicated alphabetic code of all the Roman alphabet languages. The simple ones, they are languages like Spanish, Italian, German, Finnish. They're called a transparent code because it's easy. They don't have so many sounds, and there's usually one way to represent the sounds. These codes that are transparent are easier for the children to learn, and they're easier for us teachers to teach. But a complicated code like ours does need to be very, very carefully taught. So that's an important aspect that we have to keep in mind in a very careful, structured, step-by-step progression. Okay, next one, please. Here's the first little snag. We've got in English 44 sounds that we speak, but there's only 26 letters. So that's a problem, isn't it? So sometimes we have to have 2 letters, and sometimes we use 3, and sometimes we use 4 letters. And why is it so tricky? Well, because we've been invaded by many countries, and we've been influenced by their languages. So the Celts, the Romans, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, and French all came our way. And we're rather, good at picking up languages, I think, from taking other people's words. And that's what we've done. We've taken a lot of words from different languages and often kept to their spelling as well. So it's a bit of a muddle. I mean, just look at that CH with a ch sound. Now, that's a nice straightforward one, chop, chips, church. But then, unfortunately, we've got another way of saying that the sound for the CH, and that's k. And that's from the Greek influence. They were very important people a long time ago, and we have been influenced by them. And then if you go to the French who came our way, they have a CH, but it's a sh sound, like in champagne and machine. So there you can see there's a lot of learning, and it has to be done in step by step. And that way the children come through very well. Another snag was our first dictionary was printed over 2 centuries ago. And that is the main dictionary that we use, the Samuel Johnson one. And since then, the spelling hasn't changed much. So does this make a difference to the way we teach? Well, it does. We have to be more precise when we teach with English. And that's why the systematic synthetic phonics method is the most efficient and the best. The poorest are things like whole language learning, whole language, balanced literacy, rote learning, even just saying the letter names of words and trying to get the children to remember them rather than decode them. They're the least effective. But what you need to watch out for is that if you mix your methods, if you do a bit of synthetic phonics and a bit of whole language and a bit of something else, you then reduce the effectiveness of the synthetic phonics. So it is important to try and keep to a pure understanding of synthetic phonics. There's some jolly research there. If you want to see how effective this teaching is, then you can go to that jolly research, but follow that link that I've put there. That's fine. The next one, please. Yes, that's okay, thanks. Now, Jolly Phonics is a systematic synthetic phonics program. We used to call it just synthetic phonics. And then before that, before the research into it, it didn't have a name at all. So it's called systematic synthetic phonics with the influence of America as well. So this is what people generally call it. And the reason, what is special about it is that it teaches the alphabetic code from the beginning. No whole word memorizing, just working out words and start from very simple and gradually build up in this step-by-step fun way. In Jolly, we have a very active approach, multisensory and quite good fun. And that is because us ordinary teachers were in the classroom when this was developed. And I had 44 children in my class then. And of course, you have to keep the little ones very active and on task. And that's where I started the actions. I started for identifying the sounds in words, holding up a finger for each sound. And for the formation, I started to do the formation in the air. So the children then could copy what I was doing. So this keeps them very active all the time, moving or doing something. And that's the secret for keeping children, and especially young ones, on task. And the whole idea is that we avoid asking children to read words that they cannot decode because we haven't taught them the letter sound knowledge. Thank you. Yeah. Just have a look at this awkward code here. Let's take the A sound here. Now, here, the AI says A. It's a digraph, and that's nice and straightforward. But unfortunately, there are many more ways of writing A. Just have a look at the A hop over E, the split digraph there as the word date. And then look at the AYA in the word say. And those are the three most common ways. So that's three lots of learning for one sound. And that is quite a lot of teaching. But just look at these others. Look, the single letter A usually has an A sound. But in these words, it has an A sound. Apron, angel, change. EI, that's another way of writing A, and it's in the few words like faint, vain, and veil. EY, that's another one, and that's a common word like they and grey and obey. Here's a four-letter one, EIGH, and that is in eight, nay, and slay. Not very many of those. The ET, like in ballet, this is a very strong French influence. Sorbet, buffet. Another A is EA, like in great and break and steak. And then last of all, AIGH, like in straight. But I think that's the only word. And I think there's only three of those EA ones. So these ones are far less, they happen far less often. And so we don't touch those in the very beginning. In the first year, we teach those first three, but not these more unusual ones. And they have to come later. So next one. If you want to have a good look at the alphabetic chart, you can see this one is from the Phonics handbook, our new handbook, and it's, you can easily look at this, keep it at your fingertips, because you can see exactly how the different letter sounds are made. The A is down in the left-hand corner, and you can see there are a lot of words there that have that A sound. And look at all the others as well. So just remember, there's not so much teaching of the ones that are used less often. Okay. And here is another alphabetic chart. I did this one before the previous one. And you can see in this one, you can see that the AI there, the green colour is the first one we do in Jolly. Then the pinky colours are the ones that we do in the rest of the year in Jolly. So we cover those 3 in the first year. And then the other ones, we cover some of them later in Jolly Grammar. And then we just learn the ones that use those letter sounds, because there's not many words that do use them. So that's just a different way of doing the same thing. In fact, I have more words on the previous one than on this one. And even now, there will be some words that aren't there. You know, these charts are never completely filled. So let's have a look at the next one. Now, this is quite a useful slide. I like this one in that this gives you an overview of exactly the code that needs to be taught first and how much of it. And this is roughly what we teach in the first year. Some, in some countries where English isn't the main language, they may take a bit longer. But you still want to keep up a good pace when you do the teaching, because there's a lot of learning. Now, here we've got the 75 letter sound correspondences on the right-hand side. And they need to all be learnt, not all at once. We build up right from the first one, then the next one. And then you see the colours. Well, the colours link to the reading books that are going to use those letter sounds. So the orange and red links to the orange and red readers. The yellow links to the yellow readers. There's 18 of those. Then the green is the split digraphs. And then the blue, the next lot. And then this is supposed to be purpley colour is the last group that we cover. And it's not just teaching the letter sounds, that's important. But of course, it's putting it into practice. Teaching the children how to use the alphabetic code for reading. And the way they do it, they have to look at a word like cat. They look at the letters and say the sounds, k, at, and hear cat. It's a knack, and it does come to all children. That's the reading, the blending, the working out for reading. But for writing, it's the other way around. In writing, you have the word in your head, cat. You want to say cat, you want to write cat. You've got to listen. What do you hear? K, at, cat. And that way, you've got the both sides, and you need to, as you're teaching, and in Jolly Phonics, we cover a lot, but if you can cover even more in your class, that's even better. We cover a lot of practice of decoding, working out the words for reading, and encoding, working out the right words for writing, and writing them. So, and this book in the middle, the word bank, is probably your most useful book, because in there we have written words that you can use as you teach each letter sound. So you start off with s, no words, start off, then a, no words. Then you come to t. Now you can read at and sat. So that would be in the book. Then you come to I. Now you can read sit and it and its. And then as you do another letter sound, more words become available, and it builds up and it builds up. So every day you want to do some blending practice with the children and try and get them to do it with their partners or on their own, or with somebody who will listen to them. And for writing, you want to get the children to, from dictation, to get used to writing and working out the words. Very, very powerful way of teaching. No reading books for the first 42 letter sounds. That's the secret. And words that have been blended a few times become known. And then once you've done that blending for a few times, it's in the brain. And then the brain automatically works it out and tells you what the word is. And that's how it works. And we know that as adults, because sometimes we come to a word that we've never seen before. And what do? We try and work it out. And most of the times, if that word is in our vocabulary, we are successful. And sometimes it's more difficult if it's not in our vocabulary. Suppose somebody says they live in a certain town, and you've never heard of it, you've never seen it written. Well, you can only go by the letter sound correspondences, but if it's got a CH in it, you won't know whether it's going to be a ch, a k, or a sh. So we have these problems. There's a good piece of research there by Kerry Hempenstall, and I've got a picture of the brain scan. This is very interesting because nowadays they are finding out much more about how our brains work when the children are learning to read, how their brains are working. And this is an interesting one because these scans were done on a child who struggled with reading and was failing badly. And then somebody taught them all about the phonics and decoding and working out words. And then the scan was done after that. And here you can see in the brain, the decoding, I'll tell you, the decoding side is on the left hemisphere. The non-decoding, like taking a picture or trying, reading the words by looking at a picture or making a guess at it or whatever, the whole language type of teaching is on the right hemisphere. Now, in this child, the right hemisphere, the blobby bits, are a bit larger, and the left is rather small. Now, after they've had the phonics and the decoding and the working out of lots of words, you can see what's happened. That right hemisphere has got smaller because it's not being used as much to try and read, but the left hemisphere has got much larger, and that's the correct place where it should be. The decoding and encoding is always done in the left hemisphere. So it's so important that the children actually don't have the other methods. They have just the one method and it goes straight to the left hemisphere, which is the essential aspect of it. So should we go to the next one? Thank you. Here's that word bank book. You can see that we start with this and then the and there's no words to start off with, and gradually we start to get more words, which is very useful. And on the next one, you can see further down, and we start to get more words, and you can read it more easily here. So basically, that first group of words are totally reliable, and you can use them for extra blending practice, segmenting, and dictation. So very, very useful if you've just got a 10-minute slot, you want to do a little bit of dictation, you've got it at your fingertips. See next one, words for blending only. Well, the reason is because they've got something tricky about them. And the tricky bit is the double letters. So thrill has got a double L. And unless you've taught the children when they come to the all to only go once, it's a bit more difficult. And so they've got to go thrill, not all. And the same with thick, it's got the CK. So it makes that a little bit more difficult. But of course, if you've taught them when they come to a double letter to say the sound once, then that's fine. Then you've got challenging words. And this is where you see that they are, it is awkward, some of the code. Look at width. We hardly hear the d. It is there, but we hardly hear it. So that's more difficult. So if they go, it's difficult to hear the word. Same with sixth. It sort of slips away, the x. Think. Look at the letter N in think, and it doesn't have an n sound. It actually has an ng sound. But if the child goes th-ink, it's close enough. If they know the word think, they'll make that leap. Same with thank. Anthem has got that schwa in there, which I'll talk about a bit later, where we swallow it. We go So anthem, there's another schwa there, another one there, and there, and there, and there. So the rest have got schwas in that just make it that little bit more difficult. And then the last of all, phrases and sentences that are useful for reading. So teachers can put some extra ones up on the board, and they can, the children can then work them out. They could work them out in pairs and then say them to each other and so on. The more blending the child does, the easier reading becomes. Some find it very, very easy, and others, they just need more practice. So let's try the next. So there's our first term aim, our first term of teaching. We want the children to know all those letter sounds that are on the right. And as each letter sound is taught, there are plenty of words that have been blended. All this information is in all the Jolly Phonics materials. So do follow any instructions that are there as well. And there's guidance for all your lesson plans and everything else. But this is sort of really emphasizing the importance of having enough words for decoding and working out. For writing, of course, they need to be able to write the letters correctly with good formation and correct pencil hold. They need to be confident at writing words, phrases, and sentences. So by the time you get to the bottom there for the R, they should have done quite a lot of dictation, and that is really useful. And you can see in this book, the Word Bank book, with those 42 letter sounds, we've got nearly 2,000 words that can be used for reading. So it's very, very useful. And that is how the alphabetic code works. And that's how we work it in Jolly. So now here we come to the small adjustments that children have to make. And they do this quite early on, and there's quite a few of them. And I must say it is much easier for children who have got the English vocabulary. If it's not a mother tongue, then much more work has to be done in a classroom on spoken English, developing that. And we have a program called Jolly English that just encourages the children with the spoken English and being aware of the sounds of English. So there's our schwa. That's a funny word, but basically it's a swallowed vowel. You know, just look at that word about. We don't go about. We actually swallow it and go about. Now, if a child goes about in their reading of the sentence, and they've got a bit of sense, they're getting the sense, and they've got that word in their vocabulary, they just do it quite easily. If they haven't got the word in their vocabulary, they will emphasize it and say about. And it's probably not even worth, changing that at this stage, but just to get them to say that word. So it's children. We don't say children, we go children. It's a bit of a lazy swallow, I think, to some extent from the past, but that's how it is. And that's how we have to adjust to the code. When we come to double letters, I've mentioned before, the children have to be taught to say only one sound. So if they're doing miss here, s, miss, not s. So it's a fairly simple one, and they take to that quite easily. Then we've got words with nk. Now in that nk, you've got the two sounds. You've got the and the k. Now, if the child goes p-i-nk, it's close enough. They will often be able to just get that pink. It's more difficult when it is for spelling. If they wanted to write pink and they went p-i-nk, they would try perhaps to write an ng. That's why we teach quite early on. The nk usually has an nk sound. Then a lot of words that have a s in them, especially plurals, like dogs, the s changes to a z. It's more of a z. It's not a very strong z, but it's a z more than a s. So if they go dogs, they'll soon get the idea and go dogs if it's in their vocabulary. So you can see it is an awkward one, and pronunciation, of course, varies around the world. And, you know, from our past as well, they used to pronounce it differently. And actually the Scottish and Irish, they pronounce the words better than the English. So, you know, they are much more pure in their pronunciation than English people, if you see what I mean. So those are small adjustments. Now, the children have to deal with tricky words. Now, tricky words are words that we need early on, you know, like the and he, she, we, and so on. The words that we use all the time. And they usually have a correspondence, a letter sound correspondence that is either taught later or is very unusual. So we have to help them to get to these words so that we can have books for them to read and get into sentences and so on. And, you know, here one of them is the word to is a tricky word. The letter O usually has an O sound, but in this word it's oo, and they've just got to learn that when they see that, it's not to O, top, it's to. And actually, once they've done that, they get to that pretty quickly. And of course, the t is there. They know that already. So knowing how the letter sounds work helps them enormously, and they adjust to the different pronunciation. So here you can see, here's a tricky word here, which we need quite early on. But we teach the split digraph, the E hop over E later on. And we teach the awkward bit, which is the E hop over E. And then, of course, when they learn about the way of writing E is a split digraph, the E hop over E, then it's not tricky at all, the word, it's sensible. So tricky words tend to be sensible if you know enough code. And some we could call irregular because they are used so rarely and they're such an oddity, it's not worth explaining anything other than, you know, this one you have to learn. And we've got lots of tricky words, but only 72 that we actually deal with. Oh, okay. Is everything all right your way? Hello? Can you hear me still?
Yeah, you made everything.
It just said recording stopped, but there you go. Here's how the code works for reading. And this column is nice and straightforward. You know, if you know those letter sound correspondences, that's straightforward. You're going to get a reliable answer. So d-og, dog. This one's a bit longer, but it's still single letters. Sun, you get the sun, sun-tan, suntan, suntan. And then raincoat, raincoat. And the even longer one, 2 digraphs. Chimp, chimpanzee. They, you know, they get good at it. The children, they have to learn sometimes on a long one to do a bit and sort of get that bit of the word and then go on and carry on. And here we've got an alternative letter sound, the IGH. The first one we learnt was IE. Now this one is IGH. But once they know it, they can go midnight. Then you come to the other side, and this is where it becomes tricky. But I want you to remember that there are more straightforward words than there are the awkward ones. But if you have the words in your English vocabulary, it is easier to make these leaps. But here you've got chemist, but the children won't know whether it's going to be a ch or a k or even a sh. So they've got to try them all, you know, ch-em-ist, chemist, k-em-ist, chemist. It's like Christmas, you know, that CK Greek influence. Here they've got to go lemon, lemon, and hopefully they can make that schwa in there, lemon, put the schwa there. This warm men, they would blend warm men, well, they've got to go to women. So it's very unusual for the letter O to have an I sound, but there you are. But if it's in a sentence, they sometimes can twig to that if it's about women, but on the whole, you might have to help them there. But once they've done it, then they remember that much more easily. And then for 9, we've got this word. Now, this is a word that you can't be sure of what it is, and I can't be sure of it either, because it has got 2 pronunciations. It could be wind, which is straightforward, or it could be wind. And so that's one of these odd ones where the I has an I sound. It's very unusual. So you have to be told what it is, or you read it in a sentence, and then the sentence gives you the context and you can work it out. And then here, number 10, choir. This is my favorite. I mean, the only thing that's sensible is the at the end. Look at the CH. We've already covered k, ch, k, and sh. And now we've got qua. Now the C having a k sound is okay, but qua, where does this come from? Then the oi, OI usually says oi, and it's now I. Choir. That kind of word has to be dealt with at the time, but there's very few of them, so don't get worried. Teach, just follow the jolly phonics and it works out very well. But making sure they can blend and segment and write from dictation, that's the absolute essential. Then these are the alternatives, and you can see we've dealt with the E hop over E in a word, the word here. But here, as we teach them, we also encourage the children to blend words that use them. And it's pretty straightforward for reading, because you've learnt what it is and you can say the sounds. But for spelling, now you're going to be in a bit more difficulty. If you take that A and you want to write the word late, you can hear the ate, fine. But what A? Is it going to be the AI one that you've learnt first of all, or is it going to be this one? And that is the difficulty. And if you're doing dictation and you have one of these words, you can say to the class, which one do you think it might be? And see if anybody comes up with it. But basically, with the knowledge of them and with reading a lot of books, the children develop the spelling. But spelling is always much, much harder than reading. And spelling requires far more memory. So a child who's got a really good memory will end up being a very good speller. And the child who's got a poor memory has to work much harder at their spelling. It is much more difficult. So another one that makes the alphabetic code tricky is that we have a lot of homophones in English. That is, words that sound the same, but they're spelled differently. So if you look, there are hundreds of them, and here I've got the 3 twos. So there's a TO2, the TOO2, which is regular because the double O has an oo sound, and then number 2 has a W in there. You know, you think, where on earth does that come from? But actually, you know, because we're near European countries and we've had other influences, in Dutch, the word for 2 is twee, and there's your W. So it makes it much harder for reading and spelling to some extent. But actually, homophones make the spelling more difficult, but, you know, they make it easier for the reading, because once you know them, you get the meaning of the word instantly. Whereas when you don't have that meaning and then it's much more difficult. So if you have, look at that word like wind or wind, that can stump you as you're reading along, and suddenly, whoops, you've got to make that adjustment. Here we've got the 3 buys and 3 rights, right, right, and right. It helps the children when, you say, when they see that they've got to write something and it's written with a W, they know they've got to use their pencil. So it does make reading easier, but it is certainly more difficult on the spelling. Then, oops, oh, sorry, sorry, it's a bit slow there. There's homographs, and homographs are the words that we were just talking about, like wind and wind. They look the same, but they have 2 pronunciations. And so you don't know which word it is until you have the context there, or unless somebody tells you. So they just make it more difficult. That's our alphabetic code and our language, having all these words the same, but with different meanings. Why didn't we think of different words for them? But there you go. That's how it is. So we have to help the children master these things in the easiest way possible. So thank you. Then we have soft C and soft G. Now here's, and it's a fairly reliable one, so it's quite useful, and we cover this towards the end of our first year. And this C usually has a K sound, and that G usually has a G sound. But sometimes when that K has the 3 letters E, I, or Y after it, it changes it to a S sound. And you can see in the words ice, look, see there's the E at the end after the C. So that's what's making it go S. So ice. So that's straightforward for reading. You can work that out with knowing that rule, but it's not so easy for writing. Here we've got city. Look, the I comes after the C. So it's not going to be a K, it's going to be a S, city. That's not so bad for spelling because C, you've got the S and the I. Well, that tells you there's that letter I behind it. So the chances are it's going to be C. With every little rule in English, there's nearly one word that's going to be different, but the more you know about it, the easier it is for children. And there's the Y. The Y when it's being a vowel here. Signet. Here, the K has a S sound, and the Y there is having an I sound. Now, that Y could be I, or E. That's what they learn in Jolly. And here it's being an I. They have to try one way or another. So it's by trial and error sometimes. And they need to know what the word is in their vocabulary. It's the same with the G, the same 3 letters, E, I, and Y. If they come after that G, they don't have a G sound, they usually have a J sound. But that's for most of them. But there is a word, the word get, and it doesn't apply, does it? So there are the odd ones that don't, but it's a pretty useful rule that the children benefit from. So if we can have a look at the next one. So here we go. This is another influence, the vowels. Understanding how the vowels work does help with spelling. And when the children are taught the split digraph, O hop over E, there's a consonant in between. The second vowel doesn't usually say the sound. It just influences the first vowel. And we sort of liken it with the children to a bit of magic coming out and changing the O to O. So that's why it says hoped. But if you want to say hopped, then you have to make sure you've got 2 consonants. The children imagine it like a big wall with 2 consonants. The magic can't get over the top. So they think this is amusing, but it just illustrates the rule. So that you have to have 2 consonants before after the vowel, and that's what makes it go short, the short vowel. If it's just one, it's the long vowel then. And look, you can see it works for a lot of the vowels. Here, if you want to write sliding, you have one I there, with one D, because the magic's got to come out of the I and jump over. So sliding. But if you want to write slimming, because you've got an I there, you need that wall. So the magic can't come out of, and magic can come out of any vowel. The magic can't come out of that vowel and change that one. So it's slimming. Same here with taped and tapped. That's like hoped and hopped. Here, the magic comes out of the Y because it's not a consonant there, it's a vowel. The consonant is nearly always at the front. The consonant Y in words, that's a then it's a consonant. So magic comes out and changes the O to O, so it's holy. But if you want to write holly with an O there, then you've got to have your two consonants. And it's the same with later and latter. So very useful with these suffixes that go on verbs, a very useful little rule. And it mostly works, so it's well worth explaining it to the children. So next one. Here's another oddity in English. I don't know where this one came from. It is very strange, but the letter W has some funny ways. And the first one is when you hear the word wa, or the sounds wa, it is written with W-A. Look at the words, you see. Was, want, wash, swan. They all have that wa, not a whack. Then that's one thing. There's not that many words, but we learn that. I mean, they learn was and want as a tricky words because they're very useful. But then after that, in Jolly Grammar, in the spelling side, they learn it as a pattern. So they learn a lot of words, probably about 10 words that use it, if that, so there's not that many words that do use it, but it's still worth knowing. Then here we've got, it should be were or war, but we say were. So it's not ward, but word, work, worm, world. And it's always after the W. It doesn't do it with other letters. And there's another one, the W. It should be war. And we say or, war, worn, warm, ward. So again, they learn these as a pattern later on. So, so we have a lesson on just that. And it's through reading and memorizing a lot from their reading that it helps with the spelling. Have a look at the qu. Now, if you listen, qu, there's a w there. Qu is technically not a digraph. Qu is actually technically a blend of a k and a w. But in phonics, it's not the same as phonetics. In phonics, we just teach in a way that's going to make it as easy as possible for the children. So it's a rough code cracking rather than a precise phonetics, which is a whole study on its own. So qu, there's the w, and it's got the same rule with the o, the qu. When you hear the o, it's written with an a. So the qu and the so squash, quarrel, squadron, quantity. These all come later in the teaching because they're quite hard words and they follow this pattern. So they will have a lesson of their own. And there's the same with it's exactly the same as war, but not, so it's going to be quarter. Do you see? So it's not or, but you pronounce it or, but it's written R. So quarter, quart, quarts, quartet. So yeah, you can see foolish old alphabetic code and way of doing it. But again, it is much, there's not very common. So there is a useful little trick that we try and guide the children with, in that when you've got two vowels making a sound, it's usually a digraph and we learn it and it's nice and easy and straightforward. But every now and again, it's not the two that make the sound. So here we've got the word young. The OU says owl normally, so a child would go young. Now, if that doesn't make a word that makes sense, usually one of the vowel letters does have that sound. Now, the letter O can have an O or an O sound. Yom, yom. That's not really giving me the word. Then try the next letter, the A, young. And it's that, the second vowel, that's giving the answer. Usually the sound comes from the first vowel, the second one influences it. So here we've got grief. It's not the I, it's the E that's giving it. You know, it's not an I in the middle, and it's not the I, it's that E. So they try gref, grief, and is there. With this word, neither, it can be neither or neither. People vary in how they pronounce that. And there's the, you know, in the neither, it's the E, the single letter E that's giving the sound. And in neither, it's the I that's giving the sound. And of course, in the word great, it's the A that's giving the sound. So, you know, you can fiddle around sometimes. And if that word is in a child's vocabulary, I'm amazed how quickly they make these little connections and adjustments. Of course, the top half of the class do it much faster and everything else than the bottom half of the class. Doesn't mean to say they're more intelligent, but they have that ability to do that. So let's have a look at the next one. Now, silent letters, again, here you come up against some people who say, oh, there's no such thing as a silent letter. They're all saying something. And to a large extent, they can show that. But even they have, there's some words that they don't even manage to sort out. So it's not written down, the code. It's you know, it's a sort of, it's there, and we've interpreted it in our own ways, you know, and this is my way of interpreting it with Jolly, but others interpret it slightly different. But if you've got you've got the word guy, you've got two sounds, a G and an I. Now, are you going to put the U with the G and say that's another way of writing G? Or are you going to put the U with the Y and say it's another way of writing I? So there's no right or wrong. People who write the programs have to do what they think is the best. With island, do you put the S with the I as another way of writing the I, or does the S and L go together as another way of writing all? Personally, and in Jolly, we say the U is a silent letter and the S is a silent letter. In fact, the U is put there in Guy because they don't want the Y to influence the G and change it to J. So that's why it's Guy. But it's just adds to the complexity, really. But there you are. That's the reason for that one. Why there's an S in island, I've no idea. But probably it came from another language. Mortgage, does the T go with the or does the T go with the G? You know, and asthma, is the TH going with the S or is the TH going with the M? So there is, you know, it's easier to just say you can't hear it, silent. And that suits little children better. Later on, they can learn it slightly differently, but in the end, these are just words they have to master and learn. They can look them up in the dictionary. We've got our Jolly dictionary, and there, if you want to understand the pronunciation of words, there's a nice little pronunciation guide there, which is easy to use, much easier than the International Alphabetic Alphabet. And the way the dictionary works is through the letter. So the letter that the word starts with. And usually, if we're looking up in the dictionary and we don't know what the letter is, we listen for the sound. If it starts with the O, you know, if it's an ostrich, we're going to look up in the O section, the O. And then you listen for the next sound. And then look for that letter, and then listen for the next sound. And that usually takes you to the word. And it works very well, so long as the children can all hear the sounds in words. And of course, if they're doing Jolly, they will hear them because they've been taught and taught them again and again how to listen for those sounds. Before there was synthetic phonics, you used to find people, even highly intelligent people, who actually got through mostly by memory and a little bit of phonics, but they can't look up in a dictionary. If you can't hear the sounds in words, certainly the first three, then you are stuck. You can't look up the words in the dictionary. And there are some words that you can't look up in the dictionary just by listening for the sounds. If you're a psychologist, well, that P is a bit silent at the front, and you would try and look in the S's to look it up and you wouldn't find it. So you have to know that there are a few PS words that have a S sound or a silent P, whichever way. It's not worth getting hung up in a lot of these rules, but just having a little guidance to help goes a long way. So that's about our dictionary. It's about interpreting the alphabetic code and learning how to use it. And of course, the secret with Jolly is to start with the very simplest and get them good at that, and then gradually keep on getting them going more, add more letter sound correspondences, more knowledge to them, more practice at blending, working out the words. And that is the only way that I know of that you have a chance of getting through to all the children. Well, certainly all the children who are able to go to main schools. So the next one, if you want to know more about the teaching, there is a Jolly Phonics online training course, which you have to pay for, but is very useful if you really want to do a serious studying of the alphabetic code and how it works and how to do the teaching in Jolly Phonics. And then there's one on Jolly Grammar as well. So well worth doing to help you become a serious learner of synthetic phonics and how it works, and of Jolly Phonics. And the last slide is the next one. Now, here's my website, and it is it's been altered a bit. So some people who are familiar with it might not know this first page, because it's being adapted for use on phones and iPads and things like this, rather than just computers. I don't know if Ms. Prashansha, if you could click on the SSP website, that should open up. If the technology works, if it was on. Does it work?
Yeah, I think we can see the website on the screen.
Sorry?
We can see the website, ma'am.
You can't see it live, can you? Can you get it live? You should be able to get it live with that, but
So the teachers, please show a thumbs up if they can see the website open here on the screen.
Yes. Okay. Anyhow, if you go to this yourself, and the website is tcrw.co.uk, which is Teaching Children to Read and Write. Oh, can you keep to that? Oh, you've gone. I was just going to show you how to use it. Can you go back to that, or is that?
I shared the website link also if anybody wants to access it right now in the chat box. Here's the website.
Please. Yes. So here, it's still in progress, and if you go to the one films, you will see all the different films. Oh, yes, there you are. Oh, you can do it. Okay. Sorry, I'm a bit slow. I'm getting old. If you want to see about the teaching children to read and write, so if you touch that, you've got all the films linked to that. So you can go and look at that in your own time. And it's all about the steps in the teaching. This is actually teaching synthetic phonics, using the order of Jolly Phonics, but it's just trying to get an understanding what synthetic phonics is. Then if you want to help children with their reading and writing problems, then go to the next one. And there you can see causes of the problems. Preventing is the most important. And that way you can solve a lot of problems. Getting in early will help the children that are the struggling ones. Identifying the reading problems, and if there's some guidance for parents as well there. And then the one further down, phonic knowledge, if you go there, then you can see all about the alphabetic code, and you can find out, and then those vowels that I've spoken about, you can read those at your leisure and take those on board. And then if you want to know more about decodable readers, I talk about other decodable readers. There are others available on the market. And if they've covered the letter sound knowledge that you have covered in the Jolly, then feel free to use them, because the more books you have, the better it is, and the more they can practice. So, and there's a lot of free resources there. And up here, the transcript, can you see there, up there with the Union Jack, the English flag? If you click there, you can then see that's in Tamil as well. That's the transcript of the films, and you can go to those well, you can find those. When you get to the films, the transcripts are underneath, and you can go to that and you will be able to see that the Tamil is there. Some of the others, Spanish and Urdu, are still a bit in the making, but there's Japanese and Chinese should be there somewhere, but yeah. So it's still being adjusted to. I don't think it's clear enough and easy enough for you, so I've still got a bit of work to do there, but hopefully it will be very, very useful. And so now I think I've covered what I wanted to say about the alphabetic code this time, and maybe some people have got questions that they'd like to ask.
So before that, I want to share a very special QR code with all the facilitators in the session. Please scan it and it will take you to a chart that we used in our presentation. You can scan it and use it for later.
Oh, that's clever.
So you may take a screenshot or you may scan it right now, and this is for all the facilitators. It is a free resource.
All right, let me see if I... Oh, let's take a picture there. Right, okay, I've taken a picture.
All
Do
right.
do I do anything with it?
No, you already have. So just for a few more seconds, I'll put it on display. And after that, we'll open the chat for any questions that you may have.
Okay.
All right, let's begin with the questions. So the chat box is there for you, and you can send your questions in the chat. And we would read out the questions, and Ms. Sue can answer those.
Okay. See if they get writing.
So the questions are not reaching to us. Can the tech team please see to it that facilitators are able to?
Yeah, chat box is enabled, ma'am.
All right, thank you. So, Ms. Sue, there is an interesting question by Charlotte. She's asking, is there any rule to understand where short O sound and long O sound are to be used? Short double O and long double O.
Yeah. Well, for writing, if you hear O or oo in a word, you put the two two O's down. So, but for reading, you have to use the little hint. If one way doesn't work, try the other. So if you're doing, say, hoop, you might go h-oop, hoop, or h-oop, hoop. And you have to choose the one that makes sense for what you want. So it's a relatively easy. If this way doesn't work, try another for reading. Writing is easy because it's just double O.
We have another interesting question by Neha ma'am, and she asked the best way to teach children with special needs. What are the sounds that should be introduced first? And we are talking about children with special needs here. So what would you recommend?
Just go through the order that they're in, you know, follow the follow the jolly learning order. I mean, you know, it's very, if those children, even if they've got difficulties, if they can speak in their own language, and even if they can speak in English, even better, but they can then say any sound. They can learn any sound. A baby is born with that facility. They can say any sound that a human can make when they're a baby. But as they get older, that ability diminishes. So if you try and get an adult that's never said the in their life, an adult then sometimes can't ever do that because the palate gets set, and somehow, whether it's the brain or the palate, they can't change it, you know. So, you know, if you don't have that sound in your language and you don't practice it or use it as a youngster, then you have an adult who can't actually say it. And you can try and try. That's why these very, very strong accents don't develop with adults. You know, I've got friends who went to South Africa, and the children in no time at all had South African accents, but the East Ender and my other friend, their language didn't change in the slightest, not because they were trying not to, just the mouth cannot do it. So, yeah. The younger you get the children, the easier it is to tune them in, even those who've got difficulties. If they can speak, they can do it.
We have another interesting question by Shweta ma'am, and she asks, how can we teach tricky words in a simple way?
I presume that the children have that tricky word in their vocabulary. But basically, if you see the word was, that's a tricky one, and you say to the children, look, let's sound it out. Was. Well, I'm afraid it is tricky, and this doesn't say was, it says was. Now you've got to remember that middle bit is the tricky bit. So, and actually, if you listen carefully, was, the S has a Z sound at the end, but they get used to that. There's a lot of those, but you know, but you can point that out as well. So do you see, you can still blend it, you can still work it out, but it brings the wrong pronunciation, and therefore you have to be shown how to, you know, which bit. And by analysing those words with the children, they then start to understand, oh yes, when I come to that was, I must write was. And, you know, and that helps them to learn it.
So we have another interesting question here, and if you can shine some light on it. So the facilitator is asking, what is the correct age to start teaching phonics to the children?
What is the
appropriate age to start teaching phonics to the children?
Well, I'm experienced a great deal with teaching the 4 to 5 year olds. But I know people in Malaysia who are doing it with the 2 and 3 year olds. Not so much the writing, but the learning of the letter sounds. And for writing, instead of getting them to actually physically write it, they perhaps will use plastic letters. So they're sort of making words, they're learning how the code for words works, but they're not actually, they may not have the physical dexterity in their fingers. Although, you know, if a really young one, you know, 1 year old, does a lot of colouring with a pencil and and a lot of things that use their fingers, they can learn. I remember seeing my little nephew. He was it was just coming up to 2, and he was colouring in with a lovely tripod grip and beautifully. He could write letters if he wanted to. So, you know, if somebody said copy that, yeah, no. So, but some have like puppy fingers. They haven't either. They're just naturally rather puppyish, not very strong, or they haven't done a lot of exercises and manipulative things and making things and drawing and colouring. So, you know, there's a judgment in the end.
Thank you, Ms. Sue, for that. And we'll ask one last question from you before we conclude the session. So I can see a few facilitators want to know more about syllables. What
Yes.
are syllables?
I was hoping you'd choose that one, because syllables are where we cut words up into chunks, and every syllable has a vowel in it. And where you actually make your cut precisely varies with whoever you ask. Sometimes, you know, we talk about syllables in our Jolly Grammar, and we use them, and we have a way that we cut it up, but there's no right or wrong. You know, it's sometimes some just with what your ears hear. Carpet, you know, 2 syllables, carpet. That's a nice straightforward one. But sort of elephant, you know, that's more. But if you listen, elephant, you know, you can hear your 3 syllables, elephant. It's, some people do a lot of teaching linked to them, you know, with closed syllables and not closed syllables. We think that that's making it unnecessarily complicated, and that we've never really needed that. But it is useful just so that the children get used to, if they've got a very long word, and we do the same. If we've got a long word, we go along in chunks, don't we? Putting it down. So that just helps with that. You can do what we call chin bumps. So the children can hold their throat, and they can, you know, go rabbit. So they can feel the vibrations, and you know, they're getting, or they hold their chin, rabbit. You know, you've made 2 movements. That, but again, that's just a bit of fun. But basically, the children learn to hear syllables quite well. Whether you split it precisely with what you hear or from a ruling, it just depends on the teaching. But in Jolly, we don't give rules though. We just say, listen, you know, do your chin bumps and listen and break it up into bits just to make it easier. So there's, yeah, that's our view.
Thank you, Ms. Sue. That was a wonderful session, and I see that all the facilitators who participated are very enthusiastic about the whole thing. They're sending you heartfelt thank yous. You can go and see in the chat yourself. And that was a lovely session, very informative, and I'm sure we have some strong takeaways from here. So thank you, Ms. Sue. It was great having you today.
Well, thank you very much. But I'm sorry I'm not technically terribly good. But I've done my best.
No problem. We have got it covered.
Okay. And if you go to my website, that will reinforce what I've been saying. So there we go. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody.
I have shared it once again. Thank you, Deepak sir.
Yes, you may leave.
No, only single link has to be attempted. You can access through any of the links given.
Thank you so much, facilitators. As I said, you can keep the link saved with you. If it's not working right now, try it later and the answers will reach to us. Thank you, and we'll be ending this session now. Thank you, Sanjeev sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone.